Hotep family, Kaba Hiawatha. We're continuing with our series of exploring different topics. Today's topic is, what is culture? And I know that we speak of it all the time, but sometimes we have many different views towards what culture is to us. So what I'd like to do is just share some ideas that come from some of the speakers and scholars who have defined it and who we really honor and respect their opinion. And one of them is Dr. Kwame Ajay Akoto, who wrote a book, Nation Building. And another scholar that I'd like to quote, in fact, I quote him quite frequently, is Dr. Wade Nobles, who was part of a book entitled Infusion of African and African American Content in the School Curriculum. And it was the proceedings of the first national conference put together with Larry Obadeli Williams and Lucretia Peyton Stewart and our good elder brother, ancestor now, Asa G. Hilliard III, also known as Nana Before. They really develop ideas about culture, and they round it out in a way that we can understand it, so that as we move forward and we talk about the importance of culture, we can understand what it is that we're talking about. So we just like to quote from both of these books, both of these scholars, and I'd like to just round it out in terms of my own relationship with culture, consciousness, and the curriculum. Dr. Okoto tells us that culture is the sum total of a people's evolving historical and contemporary experience. It includes their languages, their values, their interests, their principles, their beliefs, and their actions, which consists of their behavior patterns, their symbols, and institutions unique to those people that distinguish them from another people. Culture constructs, it defines, and nurtures their perception of themselves, of concept of self, spirituality, and their material world, of human relations, mortality, reciprocity, truth, beauty, tradition, language, art, music, literature, and the goals for the group itself. Culture develops how a people think, talk, eat, walk, play, dress, love, hate, and fight. They are the consequence of their own cultural orientation. Because humans are not born pre-wired, and what we learn comes from primarily our environment, there are few actions initiated, whether by the individual or the group, outside of a cultural influence. Something that Dr. Theophilio Benga, the Congolese student of Dr. Cheikh Anta Diop from Senegal, would call a cultural common sense. It can be said, as Dr. Koto says, that culture is an explicit and implicit conspiracy of thought and behavior based on certain mythological, theosophical, and ideological assumptions. They define and motivate a people to fashion their reality in their own political interests. Psychologically, therefore, for an individual to be without a knowledge of hers or his culture is to be literally out of their mind, without a blueprint for analyzing the past, negotiating the present, and building the future. Okoto then goes on to say that it is important that African people define African culture. Now, with that as a base, as a foundation of some of the concepts of culture, I'd like to look to Dr. Wade Nobles, brilliant scholar out of Northern California, in his book, The Infusion of African and African American Content in the School Curriculum. And when he talks about definitions, Dr. Wade Nobles tells us that culture is a human process representing the vast structure of behaviors, ideas, attitudes, values, habits, beliefs, customs, language, ceremonies, and practices peculiar to a particular group of people, and which provides them with a general design for living and patterns for interpreting their reality. He then gives us another definition he calls core culture. Dr. Nobles defines core culture as the central portion or strand, the essence of the process which gives the group its general design for living and patterns for interpreting their reality. Culture is the essential spirit or energy of that group. It characterizes and is reflected in all processes consistent with the group's cultural reality, including educational content and methods. Now let's begin to move into education and the role that culture plays in education. When he talks about educational achievement, educational excellence, Dr. Noble says it is a level of accomplishment indicative of mastery of a skill, ability, character, knowledge, or information representative of personal competence and socio-cultural confidence. Now, as we're doing this, what becomes important that we look to our own lives today, not just as individuals, but as a group, and begin to think about these concepts of culture as it relates to our own daily lives, because education, as I see it, is not just going to school. Education is life. And all of your experiences that you have, from the moment that you leave your door and go into the outer world, are all your experiences. Inside, by yourself, they then become your experiences. And culture is the core to what much of your relationship to the world around you is going to be, because of the nature of that individual or group collective that you have that impacts all that you experience. So that educational excellence, think about educational excellence. Think of young people who are being told that they are illiterate or that they are not achieving. Think of them as it relates to culture, what African children know of their culture, what African people, because chances are even many of us, although we're adults now, may have had that experience of not knowing our culture young. Educational excellence, a performance criterion relative to educational achievement, wherein the goal is to match the maximum as distinct from meeting the minimum standards in student and or school performance. Now, as an educator for over 40 years now, I think you can understand how I'm relating to all of this information, how it's based on some of my experiences and the things that I've seen, the things that I've experienced, because this really is at the core of what we're talking about. Because once we break these down, these episodes down, and then we can put them all back together again as one full picture, we can understand on another level what it is that we're actually talking about. Because this is what we're facing every day as a people. Whose history, whose language, whose values, interests, and principles are we actually living through? And what exactly do we mean when we say Kuchichagulia, the second day of Kwanzaa, self-determination? I remember Dr. Clark once told me that if there was one thing he wanted to give me as a young man, and to every other young man and young woman, and every other person he came in contact with. And now that I look at it, it really didn't have too much to do with culture. It was a universal principle. And that universal principle is a sense of self-concept. To have a concept of yourself first, then your place within the group, and then your place within the groups. You'll never understand groups if you don't understand your group. And you'll never understand your group if you don't understand who you are, your own personal culture. Every human being has his or her own culture, their own life system. Just as Dr. Akoto was talking about, your beliefs, your understandings, those things that drive you, the energy, the spirit that infuses you and makes you do what you do, what makes you laugh, what makes you smile, what makes you angry, all comes from a cultural common sense. And so as you see, one group may have very harsh feelings towards another group's concept. That group that has that concept embraces it and loves it and believes that it's part of their own patterns. So we have to look at this from a widespread, holistic, corrective position, as opposed to an episodic position. But the episodes make up the whole picture. Teaching style, which I've always focused on throughout my career. I focused on the importance of methodology, teaching methodologies, and understanding that how you teach something sometimes can be as important as what you're teaching. Methodologies, holistic methodologies, understanding the brain and how the brain functions. When you understand culture, you can understand how the brain functions. There are varying ways that cultures do what they study. And it's important that we begin to understand that there is an African methodology, but that African methodology is the universal methodology. And much of what we're experiencing today is the African methodology contaminated to its highest degree of learning. Because as we're learning what we are in the classroom, whatever it is, there are different levels of cognitive understanding. Cognitive means to know. You know something? As Benjamin Bloom gave us his taxonomy or his categorization of what happens in the learning process, you have knowledge, which is knowing, comprehension, which is comprehending or understanding. You have application, which is applying, analysis, which is analyzing, synthesis, which is synthesizing, and then evaluation, which is evaluating. One piece of information, this is what the neurons are doing. From axon to dendrite, they're just passing this information on. You know something. Then that one thing that you know, you understand. Then that thing that you understand, you then apply. Then what you apply, you analyze. Then what you analyze, you put into the bank of your collective knowledge to synthesize with all other things that you know. And then you evaluate what you synthesized, that you analyzed, that you applied, that you understood, that you knew. Now, as Africans, what's happening in our classrooms? Standardized tests only require you to do the first two steps, to know something and to understand it. Standardized tests don't ask you to apply, don't ask you to analyze, don't ask you to synthesize, and don't ask you to evaluate. They just ask you to know something, to understand it, and to be able to look at 4 different choices and be able to give them the right answer. Now, what becomes dangerous is that there are 2 ways that you can pass a standardized test: when you know the right answer and when you know all the wrong answers. But standardized tests do not demand that you know the answer. That's very dangerous as it relates to what real wisdom, knowledge, and understanding is. So we have to look at this and understand that not only do we have to correct what is being taught, we also have to look at the methodology of teaching that begins to transform the human mind and allows the mind to be able to pass wisdom and knowledge to higher levels of understanding, from neuron, which is the nerve cell in the brain, from nerve cell to nerve cell. We have to understand that there's more to learning than just knowing this information. Imhotep, phenomenal genius of his time, but just knowing him does no good for us. But if we could build as Imhotep built, if we could write like Imhotep wrote, if we could create like Imhotep created, that's what we're after. Not just knowing Imhotep, not just understanding the pyramids. What was the wisdom that went into building the pyramids in order for us to reenact it today in the 21st century, to do it nowadays? So our teaching style, a particular manner or method, way or form of 1, transforming information. Number 2, transmitting information. 2, encouraging the learning process 3, I should say, encouraging the learning process, and 4, orchestrating a set of experiences designed to foster development and maturation of the idea learned. The curriculum has to be a course of studies whose purpose is to systematically guide the transmission of information and knowledge and to reinforce the desire to learn and to know. The core curriculum is a program of studies in which a number of courses are unified by and subordinated to a central theme, which is called holistic learning, which combines the 4 major learning areas that we today call science, math, language arts, and social sciences. To take those 4 major areas and to combine them to the performing arts and to the creative arts, to then look to subjects such as engineering and technology, and then to build it all together based at the social studies level. All curriculum should be based in geography, history, politics, economics, and the social aspect of the curriculum. The history, the social history of a person's life. These are the concepts that we have to begin to look at. And the curricula are tools of education that must be defined and applied to the educational experience, because culture is the vast structure of behaviors, ideas, attitudes, values and habits, beliefs and customs, language, rituals, ceremonies, and practices peculiar to a particular group of people, which provides them with a general design for living and patterns for interpreting reality. The system of culture teaches the people to recognize phenomena and to respect certain logical relations amongst phenomena. Culture gives meaning to reality. As such, culture has the power to compel behavior and the capacity to reinforce ideas and beliefs about human functioning. These include issues of education, achievement, and motivation. Culture is the invisible medium in which all human beings function. It is important to note nothing human happens outside of culture. Culture is to humans, I'm going to say this again because this is one of the phrases I use frequently when I talk to people, just to get them to understand. Culture is to humans as water is to a fish. It is our total environment. Education, as well as curriculum development, is cultural phenomena. Culture is therefore the invisible dimensions of all curricula. Just as the nature of the water, whether it be salt, fresh, or polluted, influences the reality, the survivability of particular types of fish, so too do different cultural systems influence the reality of particular groups of people. All of our training and education are bound by what we call customs or professional conventions, which are nothing more than cultural traits or rituals. Culture is like our water. And like fish out of water, some humans can be out of their culture and thereby act inappropriate or fail to thrive. Culture is like the electricity that illuminates the light bulb. We can only know or understand the electricity by what it does. We need practice with education that's appropriate for African American children and the African American community. Then it should be clear that we need to understand the electricity, the culture that's going to gain that practice. So as we move through this, we get to understand that culture is really the total human process. It is how we use the spirit and the energy, the electricity of a people. So with this is what is culture, the importance of culture. And family, I'd like to ask you to reflect. I'm going to post this back up on my page so for those that may not have seen it live can see it. But also, I just want you to see this more than once and get a sense of what culture is. Reflect it back to yourself. Understand where did this lie with you? What are you doing in your existence, in your life, in your understanding, that this understanding of culture can assist you and help you go to the next level. And I just want to thank all of you who have shown such great support over the past weeks I'd also like to reinforce the idea, family, that those of us who are out here doing this work can do it better with your support. We all have our own way of having our own business. We have products that we offer to the community. Some are called physical products and some are called intellectual products. I have intellectual products. So I encourage you to go to my site, www.kabakamene.com, www.kabakamene.com. Download my free e-course and study guide. It'll come over into your, once you put your email in and you submit your email, over 6 days, the class will come to you as it relates to my next book, Spirituality Before Religions. But also, all of the DVDs I've just put up for rental or for your ability to be able to just stream it. My 3 DVDs on the Dogon. I have 2 others that come in a set, but I also have these DVDs that come to you through rental or stream, 99 cents to stream. And like I say, family, if the folk that go on to see live, or if my friends on Facebook each were simply to just rent a DVD, the types of work that I'd be able to achieve over these next couple of months, these next couple of years, would be phenomenal. And so I ask you to consider supporting the work that we're doing. Support the work that the other scholars are doing out here, because it becomes the lifeblood of what's going to make it happen. It's not all about money. That's why you'll see on many of my sites that what I offer is free. I have a 0+ for anyone that might want to give a little bit more. But if by chance your conditions make it so that you must bring it down for free, feel free to take it for free. But support the folk out here doing this work, because the more you support us, the more we can support you. We'll be back with our next Facebook Live, family. And I just thank you for tuning in. I look forward to the future. We just got to keep on keeping on. Keep in mind, what is culture and what is culture to you? Get back at us. Let us know what you think. Help us understand what it is that we all have to do to make this possible. We shall overcome by any means necessary. Marcus Garvey tells us that we're a mighty people who will rise by the will of our wills, because the Honorable Bob Marley says no one can curse who Jah has blessed. And the fact that we can be here with you, we are blessed. So I thank my son Heru for being the videographer, and the brother who has got my back doing all the great work that's making all of this happen for us. I thank my family. It ain't over till we win. Hotep.